Hey, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Tragedy into Triumph podcast. Today is a great day because we are joined by an exceptional individual, an individual who has realized what the theme of Tragedy into Triumph is, and that is that we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony, that no matter what happens in our lives, God can do great things through our struggles and bring help and hope to others. And that's exactly what our guest today, Rebecca Gregory, has been doing. So Rebecca, we're so glad to have you with us.
Thank you so much for allowing me to join you. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, I first met Rebecca probably about 11 years ago, something like that.
Pretty
And Rebecca, I will say this. I mean, you haven't changed a bit. Obviously, hey, Wendell's getting older, but you know what? With my wife, Tammy, Rebecca, every time we go out, this is how it goes. If we see people from college, this is how it goes. They'll go, "Hey, Wendell, Tammy," and they'll look at Tammy and go, "Tammy, you don't look any different." And then they'll say, "Hey, Wendell." That's the way it goes every time, So somehow that aging gene is coming to me, not to others. But we're so glad to have you here, and so glad to actually kind of take an opportunity to catch up and to see what God's doing in your life since we've been together. So we first got acquainted at a Tragedy into Triumph event, which you spoke at maybe a year or two after some tragic events happened in your life in 2013. Now maybe not everybody knows your story. So walk us through just a little bit of your story and what transpired in 2013 in your life.
So I took a trip to Boston that ended up changing the trajectory of everything, but it was a celebratory trip. It was my birthday weekend, my 26th birthday, first time ever even in the city of Boston. And I had gone up there with my 5-year-old son to cheer on a friend who had qualified to run. And I had no idea that it was such a big deal. I wasn't a part of the marathon world. I didn't know anything about Patriots Day. It's a holiday that the entire city shuts down for. And so we did all of the Bostonian touristy things. We caught a Red Sox game. We sat on the Green Monster. We ate way too many cannolis. And we were all packed up and ready to go home as soon as the marathon concluded on that Monday afternoon.
Well, and so you're ready to go home, and then we all know that the tragic events that happened on that day. And how did it affect your life, Rebecca?
Well, that day we started out at the 17-mile marker. We were tracking our runner. Everyone was so excited, cheering and holding up our signs. We were in a group of about 9 people. And someone suggested that we make our way closer to the finish line so that we could see our runner cross. And we got down there, and I always think about being so close, just right in the action. I mean, we could see the sweat pouring off the runners' faces, their smiles that stretched from ear to ear as each one crossed the line. But I laugh because that's a place where a 5-year-old starts to get a little bored, is that a marathon when you just watch runners over and over and over again. And if I'm being really honest, I was a little bored too. And I just remember my son Noah tugging at my clothes, asking, "Mom, are we going to leave, Mom? How much longer, Mom?" And I just said, "Buddy, why don't you sit down on my feet and play in the rocks like you're a scientist?" And there were no rocks. We were on asphalt. But to a 5-year-old, that was a pretty cool thing to do. And so Noah took his place on my feet with his back up against my shins. And that's exactly where my little boy was when a bomb in a back went off less than 3 feet behind us.
Wow. Wow. And your son, what happened?
The amazing part and what I want people to take away from our stories is that both my son and I are still here
That's right.
because of the decision unknowingly that I will never take credit for to place Noah down on my feet moments before that backpack went off behind us. I was able to act as a human shield, and I took everything in the back of the legs and torso and left hand, and that's what saved my little boy's life. And he essentially walked away. He had minor cuts. He had one on his leg that they were able to stitch up. He had a piece of shrapnel grazed the back of his head, so he has a little bald spot. But that 5-year-old is now 18 years old and 6'3" and way too adult to going to college and just absolutely thriving. And so I just feel like I have nothing in the world to complain about. I'm so grateful to see him do so well. For me, I've had 76 operations and counting, and I lost my left leg below the knee, and I will continue to have surgeries for the rest of my life as a result of just the injuries that have come from that. But if this is what I have to endure to be here with my family, to watch my kids grow, and I just feel so beyond blessed to do that.
Americans have a big healthcare problem. Over 100 million citizens carry medical debt while spending on overpriced and complicated health insurance. As Christians, we don't have to pay for a broken system. Christian Healthcare Ministries is a faith-based alternative to health insurance at half the cost. Plus, you can enroll at any time. Stand up to insurance and join CHM today.
Did that, Rebecca, you impress me as an individual who always, even leading up to these events, had a positive outlook about life. Is that true for you?
It was true. And I think it comes from faith in a bigger plan because my mom instilled that very early on in my life. And I come from a lot of abuse, a lot of trauma. So the first memories that I have were really sad and horrific things that happened in my childhood. And so for me, like part of that was almost like a survival tactic. I didn't know what it was like to have a normal life. And so I just was swimming like the Dory, keep swimming, because if I stopped long enough, I didn't know what was going to happen. And an interesting part about Boston is I woke up from a medically induced coma, and FBI agents were coming into my hospital room telling me that I was involved in one of the largest terrorist attacks on US soil, that, asking me questions and all, like, life was not normal after that, right? And so I just kept thinking to myself, though, I have a second chance to do it right. And I had never allowed myself to be still enough, because if I was still, then I would have to go back to certain parts of my life and heal from those and like figure out what I really wanted. And that was the first moment that I had always been a believer. I grew up in church, but my biological father was very abusive, but he was also a preacher. So that was a very weird dynamic for me. And I just remember those moments in the hospital saying, I'm not doing this my way anymore. I'm giving it all to you.
Wow. Wow. It's interesting to me because, the struggles that you had as a kid, which I'm so sorry for, so sorry for. I how maybe do you think that that even helped you navigate and prepare for other things in your life? Do you think in some small way?
I have 100% thought that. I was able to navigate everything that this journey has entailed. I mean, we talk about 76 surgeries, and I say that like it just rolls off my tongue
Yeah.
easy because that's what it's been. But the difficulty of that, but just the emotional side of it, our lives were changed forever. And I think back to that street that day, and my bones were laying next to me on the sidewalk, and I was in a pool of my own blood, and there were nails and ball bearings and BBs and everything these brothers packed into these pressure cooker bombs. And so it was a true war scene. And if you can imagine that in my son's eyes, and my 5-year old who also remembers everything from that day. But what we try to see more than that is all the good, because there
Yeah.
were so many people that rushed in to save us, not knowing if another bomb was getting ready to go off, just knowing they wanted to help strangers off the street like me. And I think about it because, we're so divisive these days, and we all feel like we are not connected or we don't have anything in common. But in those moments, we saw the greatest part of
Yeah.
humanity, because they didn't ask my religion, they didn't ask my political preferences, all of these things. They just wanted to help. And so I feel as though it would be a huge disservice to all the people that rushed in for us if I ever chose to give up or if I wasn't part of that good now.
That's so good. And it's a scripture that we quote a lot at Tragedy and a Triumph, but the Bible says we're supposed to comfort others with the comfort we've received. That's the way it's supposed to work. So we receive help from God, that comfort we're supposed to in turn offer it to the world, which is really neat to see how God is using your story to make a difference in people's lives and encourage them that they can keep going themselves. Do you know Erin Marin? Do you know her at all?
The name, but not super familiar.
She has Aaron's Law, which is about abuse in children, and she's gotten it in 38 states now in public schools with education. You know who I'm talking about?
I know exactly what you're talking about.
So Erin is one of my favorite people.
Oh,
She and Tammy and I, we love her. Anyways, she said something to me once that I think is applicable for you, Rebecca. It was so good. She endured so much heartache and difficulties in her life. And then she said this. She said, "But you want to know something?" She said, "Satan picked on the wrong little girl."
I
And
love
I thought, what a great statement. She
that.
said, because Satan didn't realize the fight that I was going to have. Satan didn't realize how it was going to motivate me to try to help others and ensure nobody goes through what I went through. Isn't that awesome? I just love that thought that Satan picked on the wrong individual, that through Christ, I'm going to overcome. And I think that's exactly what God's helped you do. I really do. Really do.
I can't love that more because that's exactly how I feel. And in so many ways, I remember one of the hardest parts of my journey was actually having to go back to Boston and testify in the trial of the remaining bomber. So I had to look at this guy, and I was sitting probably about 5 feet away from him. I had a screen in front of me where I had to circle my son's head and mine in the first scene where the first bomb went off. And then I just had to watch all of these victims' families come in and rehash the worst moments for them where they lost their loved ones and then other survivors. And it was just so difficult on so many levels. And I just remember thinking, like, I just want this guy to look at me and know that my life isn't over. And
Yeah.
I had to go back, which was really cool because I had to give what's called a victim impact statement. And I remember Googling it right before because I'm like, what is a victim impact statement? Because I had never been part of a federal trial before, which I hope to never be again.
Ever again.
It's the statement that's made before the judge and the jury make their final verdict. And I had already set and given my testimony and rehashed kind of everything that had happened to my son and I. And I was just thinking to myself, if I have this availability to give this statement in front of one of the biggest enemies of my life, I am
Yeah.
not going to waste it. And I got up there and I was wearing a blue dress with a yellow necklace, which is the Boston Strong colors. Those were the marathon colors of 2013. Already extremely rebellious for especially for me, a girl that never wanted to cause confrontation, said yes to anything and everything. And I got up, and for the first time, he looked at me. And
Mm,
I will say that it was like staring at the face of the devil. Because when you look at someone, you can see through their eyes their compassion and their soul. And this was so different because his eyes were just black. But it
mm,
didn't matter because I knew what I wanted to say to this guy. And it was almost like I was standing up in front of every single person that had ever tried to defeat me in my life, saying, "You didn't win."
yeah.
And so I started out and I said, I was asked to give a victim impact statement today. But in order to do that, I would have to be someone's victim. And I'm not yours and I'm not your brother's. And I went on to say that one act of hate that stretched a couple hundred feet, we've seen an act of love that stretches hundreds of thousands of miles. And no one is going to remember their names. What they're going to remember is what each and every survivor and the victims' families have gone on to accomplish in spite of tragedy. And I think about that because I made a promise to him. I said, I will do my part to change the world for the better because I think we all have that responsibility. And I think about that promise every morning I wake up, every time I reach for a prosthetic leg or maybe a wheelchair on the days that I don't feel well. I have it written across my mirror. I will not let evil win today, because it's a matter of, I want to be reminded of those things. I want to know how short my life is. I never want to forget that. And so I have to put on a leg, but I also have a reminder every single morning not to take 1 second of it for granted.
Yeah, 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 that's so good, so good. My experience, near as traumatic, but I've got this scar on my face and went through the windshield of a car. The car was on top of me, and I didn't break a bone and didn't lose consciousness. It's just crazy how God's and my sister in Okeechobee, Florida, I was in Tennessee, thought she should stop in that moment and pray for me in that accident, right? At the exact moment I was in it. And the reality is, I mean, when I look in the mirror at this scar, it's a reminder to me that God has something for me to do today. It's a reminder for me that life wasn't over for me, and He spared my life. And what am I going to do with it, right? Because time is so precious for us. It is. So, none of us know what tomorrow holds. None of us. But the reality is, we've got to make the most of every opportunity, whatever that looks like that the Lord gives us.
And we have to see our blessings in the midst of our tragedy. And
Yeah.
sometimes that's harder to do than other times. I used to say everything happens for a reason and all of that, and I don't believe that anymore for necessary. I believe that there are things that happen that we will never be able to make sense of, that we wish would have never happened, no matter how many times we try to wrap our heads around it, it's just a horrific thing. But I do believe that God can show us beauty through it. And we may not be able to see it today or tomorrow or the next day, but someday in the future, we're going to be able to look back and see the blessings.
Yeah, that's good. I think about questions that I want to save up for heaven when I get there to,
I have a lot
and,
of
and I'm sure I'm not going to care.
them
I
for
get
this
all of it.
day.
But there is that passage in 1 Corinthians chapter 13 where Paul says, now we know in part, but then we will know in full. And I do think there is a day where we're going to get to maybe see the thread. If nothing's wasted in God's kingdom, I do think there's going to be a moment where we're going to see the thread of it all coming together.
That's a good way of looking at it. I need to look at it that way too, the thread, because it's so, there's just been so many things that have happened to both family members, friends, or acquaintances. And I'm just like, why?
Yeah,
There's so many things I don't understand, but one day we will. I mean, that's what we
we
have
will.
to think about.
Well, and the Lord has taken your story and you wrote a book, right? In 2015, is that right?
I did. I think it came out, gosh, I'm trying to remember, either 26 or 20 or 2016 or 2017. It's funny. That book was in the midst of my trauma, and it's taking my life back, my story of faith, vision, and surviving the Boston Marathon bombing. But I look at those chapters and I thought that I knew things then. No, I was like, oh, I can write this book because it's been 3 years or whatever from this day. And now here we are 13 years later. And I'm like, I'm in the process of writing another one because there's just been a lifetime of things happen over that. And I really now can look back and see the lessons and see what I was being taught and just the plan that has been laid out for me, because it hasn't been easy, but man, has it been worth it.
Yeah, that's good. And if God is constantly working in our lives, then there's always something new for us to learn. There's a fresh perspective, there's a fresh truth for us to learn. So I would guess over these years, there's been different aspects of your life the Lord has shown you through. So that'll be great. Whenever it comes out, that'll be great. We'll have to talk again to make sure we let everybody know whenever that happens.
Key.
That's the key.
Right there.
Yes, that is the key. So you also then Speaking of comforting others with the comfort we've received, you started a foundation. Talk to us about Rebecca's Angels and what you're doing there.
So I mentioned briefly that I had a childhood of abuse, and growing up, I saw way too much, way too early on, and experienced too much. But I do believe that everything that I went through as a child and then the different traumas throughout my adulthood have really prepared me for what we're doing. Because when Noah and I, after the bombing, everyone wanted to concentrate on the physical part of it, the 76 surgeries, the not being able to walk. I was in a wheelchair or bed bound for a year and a half before they ended up amputating my left leg. And so there was a lot of downtime, there was a lot of stillness, but in that, there was a lot of very fearful moments because when we left the confines of that hospital room and his hospital, we didn't realize that our lives were going to change in such a dramatic way. We no longer felt safe to walk outside. I remember not being able to carry a backpack anymore or see a backpack because I thought that a bomb was going to automatically be in that. I couldn't smell a campfire without going back to that day. I couldn't roast s'mores with my baby. And so there were a lot of things in the aftermath that I was just trying to wrap my head around, but most importantly for Noah and his healing. I remember when I was wheeled into my parents' house after I got home from the hospital, it was 56 days later, and I went to live with my mom, which that's a whole nother story. I'm very thankful for my mom, but as a 26-year-old woman, I didn't want to go back there if I didn't have to. And so she took me in and it was just so different. And Noah said, "Don't worry, mom, we're never leaving this house again." And I just realized in that moment, his innocence was gone. It was blown away on that street. And I understood for the first time what trauma in such a young child looked like. And so I frantically started searching for help to find healing for him to try and explain the best to my ability of what happened. How do you explain terrorism to a kindergartner who's learning how to read and his letters and all of that? And so what we found though in the midst of it were all these families that were suffering through their own traumatic situations that had just had their lives blow up in different types of ways. But what was interesting is that ours was so public. Everyone wanted to help us. So we had just this overwhelming support system from all around, the psychologists, the best doctors, everyone wanted to help us heal. But that is just not the case for a family that has had a tragedy happen and it doesn't make the news. And
True.
so because we were afforded so much in the aftermath, like I really had it on my heart to do something for those other families. And that turned into Rebecca's Angels Foundation, where we've now provided almost 800 families with mental health support, trauma therapy, different mental health grants. We now have a van. We call it our Angel Missions van. So we go throughout our community and do just kind acts for first responders, for the hospitals, for nursing homes, just anything where we can let people know that they're not alone.
That's great. That's great. I'm an 800, 800 kids, right? What's the age? Is it families or kids? What's the ages typically?
We started out with kids. We were originally going to fund therapy for kids, but what we quickly understood is that you can't heal a child without healing the entire family unit. Because typically there's a lot of generational trauma in that. There's other people, if something's happened to a child, then there's secondhand trauma and there's things that has been impacted with the adults as well. So we try to really make sure that that family unit is connected and healing together. And that's been really beautiful for us to see because now it's grown from just the kids to the families. And now we're really focusing on childhood trauma specifically. Young women, I'm mentoring a couple of women now who have had unbelievable childhood things happen to them. And then they've gotten into these tragic accidents. And so all of it comes to a head. And just like when I sat down for my own therapy after the bombing, I thought that's what I was healing from. And the lady said, "Let's talk about your childhood." And I'm thinking, let's not ever go there again, actually. But I did the work and now I feel great as a result. So that is just a story. That is my part of my testimony. And I say that Rebecca's Angels is what little Rebecca needed. I am giving little Rebecca everything that she needed back then. So if I can do that for other families so that they can heal, they can thrive, I am so beyond honored to do that.
That's so good. That's so good. Rebecca, you brought up something there. I think sometimes we're tempted, we're tempted to kind of just keep things to ourselves and not, if it's something that is a like I'm struggling with myself, like let's say a matter of sin or something. Like the Bible's pretty clear, he who does what is right comes into the light. I expose it, and light exposes darkness, and we all know darkness can't survive with just the smallest bit of light. Everything changes. And I think, is it the same way in relation to trauma too, that they're speaking it, brings it into the light and allows the light of God, the light of counselors and professionals to help really expose it for what it is and help people find their way through. Do you find that truth too in relation to trauma?
If we hold things in and if we don't allow ourselves to really just figure out what we've been through, what's holding us back in life, then we are never going to fully live, in my opinion. Because I had so many hindrances. I thought that my one voice didn't matter at all. I would stay so small and I would never have used my voice in the past. For me to think about being a speaker and for the last over a decade now is just absolutely crazy to me. I would have never thought that when I was little. But when we are able to overcome our fears, when we're able to sit down and really deal with the things that have happened, and it's hard. I mean, doing this kind of work is hard work, but then we're set free. And
Yeah.
that's what I tell people because there's no way that I would be able to go back to Boston every year and stand in the same spot that I was in when my life was nearly taken, when my son's life was nearly taken. And now we cheer on all the runners because we're an official charity with the Boston Athletic Association. And so people run on Rebecca's Angels behalf, and I get to watch those people cross the finish line. That is God.
Yeah.
My gosh. And I'm standing there and I'm not fearful, I'm not scared, I'm excited. I have so much joy in my heart and I think about how hard these runners have trained and fundraised for us. And it's just this beautiful full circle moment that I know I could have never gotten to unless I allowed my walls to come down, to be vulnerable about my story. This is my heart, and I share my heart and I share my struggles and my worst chapters. Because if we're able to do that, then we connect on a level that is just unbelievable. And we realize how similar we truly are.
Yeah, that's so good. It's interesting because it is hard to expose it. It's hard work to talk through it, to work on it. But you know what I think is harder is keeping it inside. That's harder. If you really think it, because as we speak about it, as we take the help that's offered to us, that starts a snowball effect. It starts to get easier and easier and easier as we work through it. The most difficult part is taking the first step. And then, right? Am I off base there, or is that what you've experienced too?
Right. I say that the hardest but most courageous thing you could ever do is ask for help when you need it.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's so hard to just get to that moment where it's like I can't do it on my own. But once you drop that backpack of all the stuff, all the weight that you're carrying and just saying, okay, look, like there are resources. That's the amazing thing. There are actually ways to reprocess your most traumatic memories. I mean, for you to think of your brain as like a computer system that just needs a little bit of refiling, it can be done. The way that, we have all of this access to all these mental health tools that God has given us because He's given these people the ability to do this. And He's given us the ability to rewire our brains and for our brains to heal. So we have to start thinking about mental health like we do our physical health because it affects everything. So mentally, physically, I mean, your life is so precious and it's so important. Why not live it to the fullest?
yeah, yeah. We only get one shot at it. Why not? Why not?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so good. Is there a scripture in the midst of, you've had your fair share of adversity, Rebecca, and honestly, it's inspiring to me to even hear how there's this light inside of you, this fire inside of you to keep going. And I know thousands of people have been impacted by your life and your story. Is there a scripture that you cling to, something that's your go-to when you're having difficulty in your life?
Just come back to Romans 8:28. God works all things out. He really does. And I've seen it over and over and over in my life. I've seen so many miracles, even on the days that I want to doubt his existence. Even on the days where I'm just like, I can't possibly do this anymore. He still shows up. And 6 months before Boston, I got held up in a Walmart parking lot and robbed at gunpoint. I thought gonna be the biggest highlight of
Wow.
my life. Not even close. But it's like every time I look back and I can just see these miracles. My daughter is 9 years old and she's a baby that they never thought I would have after Boston because of all of my internal injuries. And she was in the NICU. This is so crazy. She was in the NICU for 26.2 days, which is the amount of miles in a marathon. It's all of those little things that you can't even make up. It's those details. I remember being in the hospital and they were contemplating whether or not to take my left leg right away because that was damaged. I almost lost my right leg as well. But I went into an exploratory surgery because I had a really bad osteomyelitis infection and it was taking over my body. They thought I might lose both of my legs and it could potentially be life threatening. And so they went in to try to do the surgery. And the night before, my mom sent out this big prayer request on Facebook and said, please, pray this is what's going on. And in the surgery, the osteomyelitis was gone. And I woke up thinking that they were gonna tell me where they were gonna take my leg because that's what they were looking for, how high up they had to take everything. And they were like, "We can't medically explain this. It's just gone." And I'm like, how do things like that happen? I mean, gotta be something, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Got to be. I had a guy tell me once, he told me he'd lost his wife and he was an elderly man, but he'd lost his wife and then he was struggling with his eyesight. And I asked him how he was doing and he kind of leaned in and he'd been a Christian a lot of years and he leaned in and he looked at me so he could see me and he said, Wendell, I'm having to live the advice I've given to people all these years. And I said, what is that? And then this is a great nugget, Rebecca. He said, when you have a lot of questions of God, make sure you're close enough to him to hear his answer. Isn't that so good? I, that was just such a good nugget.
That's like
And
chills down the arm.
I think about that a lot, God, where are you? Well, I want to be close enough. I do in my heart. I want to be close enough to hear what he's got to say because I know it's better than my own wisdom. I know it's better than my own circumstance. I know it's better than anything I could dream up or conjure up. That's what the word says. And so to make sure that we're close enough. Well, you're going to be close to our neck of the woods here pretty soon. I think in a couple of weeks, right? Or a week, I guess.
That's right, and it comes right after the anniversary and right before I go up for the marathon. So, it's gonna be a really meaningful time already, but just to have those 2 things, and then I my birthday falls on April the 12th, so it's a big week.
It just works out, doesn't it? It does. Well, hey, listen, and I want to make sure I give a plug there. So, Rebecca, how do people find you? If people want more information, they want to get your book or figure out or help with what you're doing with Rebecca's Angels, how do they find you?
Easiest way is just through our website, rebeccasangels.org. And my personal website is rebeccagregoryofficial.com. I have taken a hiatus from social media this year. So everybody's like, when are you going to be back on social? I'm like, I don't know. I'm really enjoying it actually. But I'm also at Rebecca F. Gregory everywhere else. So I'll be back on eventually, but we'll see.
Well, great. Well, hey, listen, we're better off for the time that you've spent with us today. So thanks so much. And we just wish you the best in the future. Okay.
Thank you so much. And for everyone that's going to attend the event or thinking about attending, there's so much more to this journey. This is only a piece of the crazy. So I can't wait to talk about more and just spend time with everyone. I'm really looking forward to it. And thank you all so much. And thank you for letting me be a part of this today.
Thank you.
Life is hard. Bad things happen to good people. And yet, some people learn that their struggles, failures, and flaws can be stepping stones instead of obstacles. They find a way not just to survive, but to thrive despite facing hardship. Would you like to be a person like that? Someone who manages to find victory, joy, and peace, even when the storms of life come. A simple step you can take right now is to order Wendell Brown's new book, Living in Triumph. In this compelling new release, Wendell shares with you proven secrets not just to getting by, not just to endure hardship, but actually to thrive, grow, and discover more than you ever thought possible. To order your copy, go to www.tragedy-into-triumph.com/books. That's www.tragedy-into-triumph.com/books. This is a book that can change your life. Order today.